Just had a Zoom on here with TikTok.
How'd it go?
From TikTok reaches out yesterday with a tweet from this rep Jake, and his last name sounds like a sneeze. It's like Auchincloss or whatever. We'll call him Rep Jake for now. TikTok emails me and is like, hey, just want to let you, be aware of your Massachusetts politicians. Like, they're the ones that, signed the bill to ban TikTok. She's like, here's the tweet. So I tweet him back, and his assistant gets back to me, and I'm like, hey, I would love to have a debate with you on the show to discuss this. And they agreed, and here we are. There's 170 million Americans actively using TikTok. There's 7 million small businesses on TikTok that make their livelihood through, and that's a mix of creators and TikTok shoppers and all that stuff. But like, what do you do now?
Look at Kevin with his bag. He looks like a fucking government official.
Looks like a politician.
Going to save TikTok. Here we go.
Here. Operation Save TikTok, gang. I thought I was going to be in my boxers ordering Chinese food on a Friday night. Not the case. We're meeting with a politician who co-signed the bill to ban TikTok. So we're coming after his ass, all right? Ask the hard-hitting questions. Here we go, gang.
60K student loan debt. Flash 2 years later, Flip Life paid off the student debt.
Kevin, you with the couch flipping. I started 2 years ago. Our first month, we made 10K.
Let's go!
We'll go to the south of France, spend a week out there. I like it. Yeah, we're there.
Cheers, buddy.
Wow. I went on 6 dates in the same area for one night, and I only got caught once.
No! Whoa!
I think you got ripped off. I know you made money.
I got ignited.
Well, your wife's too hot for that.
What's your Dunkin' Donuts order?
It's a large iced caramel swirl, regular.
One more, what was it?
Conversation. Thanks for making the trip.
Well, I'm excited to have this conversation with you because it'll be an interesting and unique stance from politician to creator on arguably the most topical, topic going on right now with the TikTok ban. And I honestly think you and I was talking to Georgina prior to this, I think we align more on this than we actually think. But I'm curious, you helped co-sign the bill to ban TikTok. What is your stance, on that bill, and what brought you to, co-sign that bill?
So I was the co-lead of that bill.
Okay, yeah.
Last Congress, we got it passed with a big bipartisan majority, signed into law, and then just upheld today by the Supreme Court. And we'll see what Donald Trump does with it. So let's start first with what the bill does. The bill is not a ban. It is a forced sale of TikTok. And the leverage behind that forced sale is that if they do not sell to a U.S. company, then they have to go dark on U.S. platforms. And technically what that really means is that they can't use American services, so the App Store or cloud-based infrastructure, et cetera. Why do I feel so strongly about this? Number one, because TikTok is owned and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. And I think it's easy for Americans to elide past that and say, well, Twitch, Facebook, Snap, whatever, they're all kind of these big corporations. It's a problem because in China, there's no such thing as a private company. ByteDance answers to the Chinese Communist Party. They have a Communist Party cell within ByteDance. And that means that questions about data custody, questions about content moderation, and questions about underage usage are ultimately answerable to the Chinese Politburo. And to have 170 million Americans consume media and information via an app controlled by our chief adversary is not a sustainable position for the United States. It'd be like if Walter Cronkite in the 1950s and 1960s was a Soviet spy.
Right. And that, I'm so glad you started there. We were talking about this on the ride in. Couldn't agree more. And this is coming from a creator, national security, number one in our book over, doing the renegade, on TikTok.
Also, I would say a threat to creators as well. Because let's imagine there's geopolitical tension between us and China, which is very imaginable, right? They're looking at Taiwan in 2027, or we're in the South China Sea over the Philippines. Right. And one of his points of leverage is, I'm going to suppress content coming from American creators. Right. Very easy thing for him to do.
Right. I think from a creator's lens, the frustration is, when MySpace started popping off, this is what we were talking about with Georgina prior to this. MySpace, Tom from MySpace is everyone's friend in the U.S., that was back in, was it 2000? I was even going to go earlier,
2004, 2005, because I was in high school with
Okay, yeah. So
like, it's interesting because you build a business on top of what feels like the garden here. It's secure, the foundation, you build this business, and then the creators are just shocked that it's like a house of cards, it turns out, and not this concrete, Why back in, and I know this is way before your time, my time, but 2004, 2005, once social started becoming a thing, there wasn't a global policy like we're trying to do now, where it's like, hey, if you're going to do business, on a social platform, it's got to meet XYZ standards. Why and maybe it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, because the frustration I get in our DMs from, just like we've had the Gary V's of the world on this platform who are, entrepreneur, creator focused, and the frustration we get in our DMs is like, okay, you built a following, your income comes from this, and then poof, it's totally gone. It's like, why early 2000s was there not, something already in play so that moving forward, it's like, okay, it really is a solid foundation on a house of cards.
Data portability across platforms and audience portability. There's a number of things to unpack in there. First of all, I think what you're speaking to is that we have a challenge not just with Chinese communist control over our digital town square, but also American corporate control over the digital town square, right? Like, I want TikTok to answer to U.S. law. I also have a problem, though, with the amount of power that Meta and X and Snap have over what creators can say, what Americans can consume, how our children are being impacted by social media, right? Like, this is something that's going to become very salient to you over the next few years. My 2-year-old can take this thing out of my pocket and she knows how to use it already, and it's unnerving.
Totally.
Because they're attention fracking our kids and they're monetizing their attention spans for the benefit of advertisers. And Congress has done basically nothing on this problem since the 1990s.
Right.
And so what I'm hoping is that Americans use this as an inflection point to say what social media has become under Web 2.0 doesn't have to be the status quo. That we don't have to allow Zuckerberg and Elon Musk to dictate our ability, both free speech and free enterprise, and that we can move towards a more Web 3.0 pluralist open governance model where you have data portability between platforms and people have a lot more transparency about the algorithm itself. These big tech companies will come to Congress, and what they basically claim is, we're content neutral. We're like a bookstore owner. People publish books and we host it on the bookshelves, but not up to us. That's bullshit.
Right.
Their algorithms are editorial in nature. They amplify certain content, they suppress certain content. So when they come to us and they're just like, hey, I don't know, we're here, people say things. No.
Right.
They need to be answerable to the United States taxpayer and constituent about the fact that they are, in fact, publishers themselves.
Right, totally. On the creator end, a very real world problem we're facing now is, come February 1st, well, she's due February 8th, but so February 1, we'll have a mortgage to pay and a baby on the way. What advice do you have for us now that TikTok isn't a viable option for income?
Well, I hope that TikTok is a viable option for income. The intent has never been to ban TikTok. The intent has been to force TikTok to be owned by a U.S. company. I hope it's not Elon Musk. I don't think that's good for the United States to vest more power and wealth into that guy's hands, but at least his businesses are answerable to the United States Congress, and we can enact some of the laws that people like me have put forward to hold them accountable. Or it could be bought by a company or a consortium like Project Liberty that's trying to move towards a more Web 3.0 governance. But I respect both free enterprise and free speech. I want people to be able to produce things and build their brands online. I also want them, though, to be able to do it on a platform where we are not outsourcing our conversation to a foreign adversary.
Yep, right. That I get, but what do we do February 1st if there's not a deal? That's back to like the house of cards I was talking about for creators. It's like, for years there's nothing in place, and now we're at a position where it's like 170 million active users.
Yep.
I think that's 7 million small business owners on that platform. In mass, it's like 2,500 small businesses need TikTok to provide. 2 of them being right in here. What do we do come Feb 1?
I think what we've seen with social media is that it's a network effects phenomenon, right? People go where people are going. It's like having a telephone. You're only going to have a telephone if somebody else has a telephone. And we have seen this cascade starting when I was in high school with Facebook, but then moving on to Instagram and Snap and Twitter and Reddit and now TikTok, where you're always going to see network effects flower on the next platform. And so I don't think we're ever going to have a situation in the near term where there's not big audiences on platforms where people like you can sell great content, but they've got to be platforms that are answerable to the United States.
Right. And that I totally agree. But for us, February 1st, there's going to be a mortgage. She's due February 8th. Like, what should we do? Like, do I, what do we do? I say that because I want you to know I'm sitting next to you. I agree.
Yeah.
Like, foreign adversaries need to be held responsible, need to follow U.S. law. But there's me and 7 million small business owners that are now like, oh shit, on the 1st of next month, we'll have heating bill, mortgage, and then our biggest pool of income is,
Yeah. And I certainly don't want people to experience financial distress. I think that as you've indicated, we've been building on a foundation of sand for years now on TikTok. The instant that we have a social media platform that is answerable to a foreign adversary, there was never going to be a long-term regulatory environment that you could build on in there. And your point about the fact that, hey, I wish we had a sort of decipherable set of rules from the early 2000s so we could build inside. Obviously, 2020 hindsight, the internet's changed a lot in the last 20 years. But I agree with that. That's what we have to build now.
Right.
Because Congress hasn't passed a law in 30 years about social media, not since the 1990s. And that law in the 1990s, what that law was, it was immunity from liability for these big companies.
Right, totally.
What we have to do is update that now across a whole array of fronts so that digital entrepreneurs can build with confidence in the future. Because I don't want this to happen when you're, having your second kid or your third kid.
Right. That's what's interesting now, because creators on my end are put in a weird position where it's like, it's. I mean, this from being a politician. Like, you build up a loyal following.
Yes.
It'd be like for politicians being like, okay, you can no longer type. You have to. You can't use X, let's say. And then it's like, oh God, I built a master following on X that I can no longer communicate with.
It's frustrating.
You know what I mean? It's like it puts
that.
all these people in this weird juxtaposition of like.
It's frustrating. And this is, without kind of weighing in on one technology or another, because I don't claim to be an expert, this is what the Web 3.0 blockchain people are talking about when they talk about blockchain-based social media, is the idea that people who build up an audience on one platform are able to port it over to another. Because they have custody over their data and their audience, not the corporations. Now, the technical stack behind that is complicated, but it does speak to, I think, an important transition between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0, which is Web 2.0, you as a creator, your livelihood is subject to these big corporate leviathans, whether they're answering to the Chinese Communist Party or to the U.S. Congress. It goes through them and all the regulatory and corporate uncertainty. One day Mark Zuckerberg is saying, I'm doing fact checking. The next day Donald Trump's elected. And he's like, actually, no, I'm not. Right? That affects your livelihood. I think the vision is in Web 3.0 is if you are a visual artist or a musical artist or a content creator like you've got more ownership over the content and the audience that you have created, and it's disintermediated from the rent seeking of the big companies. Right. And we're in this painful transition period, I think, from there to Web 3.0. I think an important step there is that TikTok needs to be a U.S. company. Right.
And how do you think this will play out? Like, now speaking to the 7 million small business owners, payroll is going to be due, early next month. Like, what happens Sunday? And I know it's all speculatory, and I'm not holding you any hard facts on that. But what happens Sunday? And then, do you think now in a forced sale position that ByteDance, have you heard any inklings of okay, they're in a position now where they're squeezed so much, a sale to Mr. Wonderful is probable,
A lot depends on Donald Trump, as with a lot of things in America right now. The law says that the president can issue one 90-day extension if he can demonstrate that there has been significant progress towards a sale. So Donald Trump has really three options. One is he can just say, go dark or sell it right now. 2, he can issue a 90-day extension and really turn the screws for them to sell. Or 3 is he can just not enforce the law at all and go to court and drag this process out. And I cannot speak to what Donald Trump is going to do. His, track record on fidelity to the law, I'd say is not great. So I'm not going to make a prediction one way or the other. What I think would be best for America is if he, did one of his bold-faced, all-caps tweets and was just like, ByteDance, you better sell right now, and then they would do it.
Right. Do you think that, I've always been wondering, because it's so above the creator's pay grade, that level of negotiating, like, you got 7 million small business owners that are literally like, we don't give a damn, like, if it's a sale, if it's Musk, if it's Mr. Wonderful, like, the rent or mortgage, or family needs income to survive, like, so I hope you're right. I hope it's just a weird, because if ByteDance holds firm and they're like, no, we're not selling, you guys are only a third of our market share. We still have Canada, South America, Europe, Asia, you guys are just out. Like, do you think
they could carve out just the American element, the American audience of it. And I think that's, in fact, they've already do that, right? The Chinese version of TikTok and the American version of TikTok are very different, which I think speaks to some of the risks of this platform. Chinese youth see a very different product than American youth do. And in fact, they have screen time limits in China, which they don't do for American kids. And they show educational programming for Chinese kids, which they don't do for American kids.
Right.
Like, we're basically outsourcing a lot of our ability to inform and educate the next generation to the Chinese.
Yeah. And it always seems, I'm a big, by looking back, you can see the future kind of guy. I'll have to send you, I was reading all these articles the other night. When the kaleidoscope first came out, they literally had articles saying the kaleidoscope is going to ruin children. It's going to ruin them. We'll never make eye contact with our kids. They're going to be looking, imagine how ridiculous that sounds. And then that slowly moved. And as we, I feel like there's always
they said the same about bicycles.
Yeah, there's always like a big monster, AI.
Video games. Here's the thing, though. And Jonathan Haidt, the social psychologist who wrote the book The Anxious Generation, documents this, I think, compellingly. It's not speculative. The evidence is quite compelling that since 2012, which is when the smartphone with social media apps became really ubiquitous for kids, 12 years old and older, you've seen a huge spike in self-harm and body image problems with young women, and a big increase in antisocial behavior with young men. And this is really confirmed for me when I go out and speak to middle schoolers and high schoolers. These kids are on their phones all the time, but they also recognize that they've had a play-based childhood replaced with a phone-based childhood.
Yep.
And they understand that they're not the users of these platforms. They are the product of this platform. Their attention spans get packaged up and productized for advertisers, and it's warping their social lives.
Yep.
And when we host a congressional app challenge where middle schoolers and high schoolers can build new things. And what's striking to me is that earlier this month when they submitted, most of the apps that they were building were about in-person connections. Hey, neighborhood cleanups, or here's how to have hard conversations across political dividing lines, or here's how to talk to a friend on a school bus. That was literally one of the apps. Like, these kids are so hungry for in-person.
Right.
I'm worried that we have allowed these companies to just keep on getting richer the more times our kids spend scrolling, and we're disempowering parents to fight back.
Right. Has there been any thought to, similar to happen with COVID, with the lockdowns, suicide rates went through the roof?
Totally.
With, you got 7 million people's livelihoods that are at risk. And you got this huge community. Even we posted a video this morning with some dark comments, but in this kid was, I'll have to send you the clip, the kid had both his mom and dad die and was looking at our videos as kind of like an outlet to get out of his reality. Has there been any thought to, if TikTok goes away, and it'd be interesting to map, a couple years down the road, the potential increase in suicides with small business owners being axed, no more means to provide, not enough time to, took us 4.5 years to amass 1.3 million followers. And on IG, just full scope, we've built a little under half that audience. I think it's in the same amount of time, it's like almost 450,000 followers on there, just because the algorithms are so different. Like they're both, they call it the attention graph.
Yeah.
In the algorithm, you know.
And these attention graphs, TikTok, Insta, Snap, a lot of times they're being calibrated towards the 7 deadly sins, right? People, they're trying to get people keyed into pride, greed, lust, envy, and I worry that is what we are training kids to then orient towards, and that's what the kind of content they're consuming, as opposed to things that amplify the best amongst us.
Right.
I want content creators like you to be rewarded for producing great content and not to constantly have to be chasing an algorithm that makes somebody else richer.
Right. Right.
And we've outsourced our ability to do that to U.S. corporate and Chinese communist power. It's not that social media doesn't have a lot of good benefits. You know, people were complaining about radio and radio. I mean, people were complaining about the printing press when the printing press came out in the 1600s, right? You never want to be that person standing astride history and being like, oh, this new medium is going to destroy everything. No, social media is here to stay. It's a great place to connect with other people and to learn interesting things. You know, I'm a nerd. I follow like linguists and historians, and I think that stuff's fascinating. Like, it's great. But with every new medium that's been introduced, whether it was the printing press or the TV, we've had to adopt new norms and conventions and rules to keep, you know, it's like sanitation for a city, just to keep things going. And I feel like social media has spread so fast within the space of one generation that our laws just haven't kept up.
Right.
And we just gotta move now. Congress has to move. We're not famous for the speed of that.
Right. And I almost think it's one of those situations where it's like Pandora's out of its box.
Well, that is for sure.
There's no going back. You know, it'll be fascinating. You know,
you got to go forward.
Right. It'll be fascinating. Like a decade from now, our kids will make fun of us for having a physical brick, and it's not just like, you know,
the Neuralink.
The Neuralink. Yeah.
I wonder about that. Do you think that is? Because the most valuable real estate, I feel like, for these tech companies now has become the wrist and the face, right? They really want to get as close as possible to your brain, really.
Right.
But I wonder whether they're going to be able to make that leap. Because remember, they tried the glasses, right?
Yes, yep.
And it doesn't seem like it's had a great adoption. Maybe they're just not good enough yet. Maybe
I think it's like too big and too clunky, you know? Like you can't walk around with this big...
Right.
But if you could make that a contact lens...
Okay.
Where it's, you know...
Or even an embedded ear.
Right.
Where you're...
Right. Like I know there's... it's not Meta Ray-Ban. There's another company that does... smart glasses where if you were to talk in a different language, it would translate in my ear for me.
Really?
And then if you were far away, and I couldn't quite make out what you were saying, it'll do subtitles. So that's here, you know?
And Neuralink has done some implants that I think are helping people with paralysis move some of their limbs.
Right.
So
it's interesting because you're right. And then it becomes like, I think even the bigger picture, it's like, let's say Neuralink works flawlessly, hypothetically, there's no downside. That gets interesting because it's like, well, then the rich would just get Neuralinks, and the gap would... I'm a big... which I don't know if you find peace in this. It gets a little like... This always freaks Ashley out, but it gets a little... you know, Elon Musk said this years ago. It's like, we know how this ends, where it's like, however many years from now, the robots take over, kill us all. If that's true, which as dark and as crazy as that is, it's like, okay, that's here. Where are we on the... Like, how much time do we actually have? You know what I mean? Until it's like, what are we even doing? You know?
Two things concern me. One is, and I like you, don't know this pace of this. One is augmenting human intelligence natively, where it's like right in the brain. And you can totally see this getting plugged into artificial intelligence, right? So we have like these massive data centers that are cranking out... GPT 5, 6, 7, 8.
Right.
And everybody basically has like an augmented AI so that you're thinking faster and you're connected into the internet. And while, of course, you can see a lot of benefits of that, it also starts to feel like we're diverging from kind of core humanity. And number two is genetic engineering of kids. Because you're going to start to see a scenario where parents are going to be able to say, and it's going to start off very salutary, where parents will say, hey, my kid has a rare disease. I can see in utero they have a rare disease. I want to excise that gene. Great. I mean, everybody wins. This kid can, you know. But then it's like, oh, actually, I want my kid to be 6'2".
It's like building a Madden character.
Yeah,
you're like speed all the way, agility.
And that really is like, and I love science. I grew up in a scientific family, but at a certain point, you're like, whoa, this is starting to feel like we are, again, diverging from core humanity here.
Right.
And that is not science fiction. Like we are sprinting towards that technical possibility.
Totally.
And there's some evidence actually that the Chinese are looking at that ability from an offensive capability standpoint.
Right. And then does that become almost like the space race all over again with if China's going to do it, well, shit, we have to sprint equally, if not faster.
For both biotech and IF.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I guess I want to just end with this because I don't know if this was cleared up. If TikTok goes dark, there's no sale. What do you think? Like, if you were to put a percent on it, what do you think the percent chance as of now? It is Friday afternoon, 2 days out from a D-Day, if you will.
Friday afternoon.
What do you think the percent of a ByteDance selling, or even because in that law it's like you just need a viable buyer to get the 90-day extension? Is that how that reads?
So it basically is a determination by the president.
Okay, yeah.
The challenge that I have with putting a number on this is that you're asking me to prognosticate from Donald Trump's brain, and I can't do it.
Right.
Because like I said, he's got three choices here, and there's a why. This is a guy who changed his mind. 4 years ago, he was all about, hey, TikTok's a threat, we got to do it. Then TikTok's lobbyists got to his inner circle, and they told him how popular he was on TikTok, and then he was like, actually, I really like TikTok.
Right.
So now you got Republicans who literally 6 months ago were all about it, shifting their positions. So it's very challenging for me to play that game of chess with him. I think over the long run, I do not think it is tenable for TikTok to be owned by ByteDance and continue to have the current level of popularity that it has. I do not think this is a platform that is a sustainable platform in its current form.
Right. So what would you say, just to close it out, practical, you're talking to a guy who, to pay off my student loans, I would literally search free on Facebook Marketplace. I graduated 2017, paid 60 grand student loans off by getting free furniture, flipping them, paid it 60 grand in 2 years. What's the practical 7 million small business owners come Sunday, potentially, you're done, finished, no more income for you? What is like
Well, you're talking to a guy that has, I don't know, George, what do I have? 20,000 followers on Twitter. So I'm not sure I would give practical advice on how to build a sustainable and big audience because I clearly produce
more just to what do they do to pay the bills? What would be the, do I get to sit next to Georgina on the next flight and I work for, what is, for 7 million of us, what do we do come, basically Feb 1 when bills
I think even though platforms might change, I think social media is here to stay, and people who create great content like you do are going to be able to monetize that.
Even though there's potentially a 4 or 5 year gap in building another audience on another platform.
Yeah, I'm not going to predict audience build-out times because each platform is so different, and
that's what
maybe is different from TikTok.
So that's where it gets hairy because it's like, DCU is going to come knocking, being like, hey, it's been 5 years. Where's the mortgage payment? And you wouldn't get 5 years. You'd be out in 2 months missing a mortgage payment, So that's the struggle creators are having right now. It's like, everyone with normal W-4 or W-2 employees are good to go, but the K1s in the world are where do we go?
I understand.
Is Kyle going to come with me and vlog Facebook Marketplace couch flips again? We've done that road. Do we start that on Monday? You know what I mean? The practical, think Gary V flipping mugs, practical, hey, mortgages due, what would be the answer?
Yeah, I understand the disruption and the apprehension. I don't want to act as a financial planner for people. It is a skill set that is not going to go out of style to create things that people want, regardless of the platform. My job as a policymaker is to ensure that those platforms are places where we can truly have both free speech and free enterprise. And this platform is not one that provides for either.
Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Thank you so much. You going to the inauguration?
That was the plan. They've now moved it indoors.
I heard about that.
I do not know what the rules on attendance is going to be. But listen, the biggest city in my district, Fall River, voted for Donald Trump. I'm going to be there to represent those voters and to uphold the great American tradition of the peaceful transfer of power.
What do you think, gang? Kind of what we thought, right? You ask a question, you get more of a political answer, you dig a little deeper, right? No real clear-cut solution on, hey, someone who makes their livelihood on this app, what do they do now? No real answer. I don't think there's a ton of consideration there. I don't think there's a lot of thought overall on the mental health implications this might have, in the not too distant future on folks. So I don't know. Weird times. Let me know in the comments what you thought. As always, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Kevin Cooney on all platforms. Hugs and kisses, gang. Love ya.